Chapter 3. Her name was River Fox because of her reddish coloring, but everyone around the stable called her Vixen. They didn't mean it kindly. She kicked every last one of them at least once. Even with gentle currying and handfuls of tender clover, she didn't tame. The plantation master kept her because she birthed beautiful foals. Nathaniel figured she acted the way she did out of anger. Vixen was a gorgeous, rounded animal, but she didn't hold up in Virginia's subscription races that required a horse to win 2 out of 3 heats. After running and losing and being whipped for the failure, Vixen was given to the plantation mistress as a pleasure horse, but she threw the lady off onto hard ground, so Vixen was hitched to a lightweight chase like a common farm mare. Nathaniel just knew the noble-blooded mare felt her new job was humiliating. Nathaniel crept along the wall of the stall to avoid a bolt from those brutal back hoofs. "Here, girl," he crooned, and ran his hand along her chestnut coat before attaching her halter to a line. She led her out into the lukewarm sunshine. Dancing along behind him, her eyes wide and her nostrils flared, she snapped her head to and fro, alarmed by the crowd. Nathaniel felt her quiver with agitation. Good, he thought to himself. She's in fine fettle, ready to throw a fit. He couldn't believe what he was planning. He was so careful to hang in corners, to remain unremarkable. This was asking for trouble. But Nathaniel didn't care. He was so unhappy about the day's twist and fate, he wouldn't care if Owen beat him senseless. He almost preferred death to yet another unknown. Maybe that's what he was really after. He kept his head low, his grip tight on the line, and walked on like a condemned man happy for the gallows. "What's this, boy?" Owen snapped. "I can't afford the likes of her, and she'd be worthless hauling iron." "She pulls a 2-wheeled chair, master. She can pull a cart." Nathaniel didn't add that she'd nearly kicked the same small carriage apart. He was counting on a vanity that he could sense in Owen, a desire to climb up in social class. A fine-looking mare could help. Virginians set a store on their horses. "What's her price?" The auctioneer began to sift through his list. "What's her name, lad?" "River Fox," murmured Nathaniel, hoping she was recorded as Vixen, buying him time as the auctioneer looked for her information. He positioned Vixen so that Owen was several strides away from her backside. Nathaniel knew that horses hated being approached from their hind quarters, where their vision was blocked, and from where their predators, such as wolves, attacked. Stupidly, Owen walked straight toward her rump. That's it, Nathaniel thought, watching Owen approach for his inspection. Vixen began to flinch aside and crane her neck to see what was coming. "Hold her steady, fool," Owen grumbled. He was looking at her silky, flowy tail that cascaded to the ground. How many times had Nathaniel been knocked over trying to comb it out to keep it so attractive? "I'd have to dock this," Owen said, referring to the practice of bobbing horses' tails. It was a cruel doing in Nathaniel's mind, for fashion's sake, denying a horse his ability to switch away biting flies. "Docking's the macaroni in Williamsburg. No horse has a long tail. A pity, though, fullest tail I've ever seen. Maybe I can sell that horse hair for surgeon's thread." "Yes," pleaded Nathaniel silently. "Take hold her tail. That'll do it, sure." Owen lifted his meaty hand and grabbed up Vixen's tail. He might as well have slapped her with a thorn-studded crop. Vixen's eyes rolled back. Whinnying in alarm, she pawed the earth with her front hooves, threw her head down, and kicked back with a force that catapulted Owen and all his bulk several feet. He landed with a thud and a curse in the mud. Nathaniel felt a small, sly smile of triumph slide across his face. It felt good to embarrass someone who cupped his ears. A strange, hot vengeance overcame him. Nathaniel knew that given the chance, Vixen wasn't done with Owen. Oh no. He should have held on to her as she thrashed and kicked to prevent her doing further mischief. But Nathaniel didn't. He let go of the line. Vixen wheeled around, snorting like a dragon, high-tailed murder in her look. Owen had been lying and shouting curses. Seeing Vixen turn, he stopped mid-blasphemy and struggled to get up, but he couldn't right his heft. Instead, he rolled onto his hands and knees and crawled. Vixen reared onto her back legs, pumped her front legs in the air, screamed shrilly, and then came down hard, missing Owen's body by inches as he rolled to the side. She reared again, landed again, missing only because Owen rolled the opposite direction. It was the way horses killed snakes. Nathaniel had seen it, rearing and pounding until the serpent was sliced apart. "Help! Ho!" Owen cried out in despair. Vixen was in more of a rage than Nathaniel had planned. She really might kill Owen. This is not what Nathaniel had meant to happen. He just wanted Owen humiliated, as he'd been over and over again since setting foot on this accursed shore. Nathaniel waved his arms. "Hey! Hey! Vixen! Off with you now! Hey!" Once more she reared up. Owen seemed rooted to the ground. Nathaniel scooted between them. For a moment Vixen balanced herself on her hind legs as if considering. If she came down straight now, she'd hit Nathaniel, but he held his ground. Her eyes seemed to meet Nathaniel's. She twisted, landed to the side, and took off, running the fastest race she'd ever given, straight for the big house. Feeling like he might throw up, Nathaniel doubled over, all his anger spent. But in the distance came the sound of cries and crashes. Now he'd be responsible for the price of Vixen if she'd escape. Nathaniel straightened. He'd have to catch her. Nathaniel struck off as Owen crawled toward him like a crocodile, and just missed latching onto him by the ankle. Chapter 4. It wasn't hard to track Vixen. Nathaniel simply followed the trail of dropped baskets, scattered papers, and startled people, all staring in the same direction. He heard a whinny, a terrified, "Great God!" a clattering and crashing, and the sound of dozens of items hitting the road. Plop, 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 plop. "Oh my, they'll all be ruined! Ruined! Someone shoot it! Shoot it!" Nathaniel sprinted. He didn't care that the crushed oyster shells in the house's pristine lane were cutting open his bare feet. If someone shot Vixen, Nathaniel would be indentured for the rest of his life for sure. More people scattered, parting the crowd. Now Nathaniel could see that Vixen's victim was the old man with the book-filled carriage. Vixen was nipping and driving the carriage's horse in play more than anything else to assert her dominance. But by Vixen's hurting the poor weaker mare, the riding chair was going round and round like a whirligig, spewing out books as it spun. The old man had dropped the harness reins and was clinging to a long ornate box, crying, "The spinet! Not the spinet!" None dressed in finery were willing to approach the wild Vixen, churning up clods of mud as she danced the carriage horse around. The scene, in fact, was so ridiculous, the spindly man so silly-looking that a few of the merchants standing about were laughing. But Nathaniel was not amused. The reins were slithering along the ground, beginning to wrap about the carriage horse's hooves. A few more loops around her front legs and the horse would go down, overturning the riding chair and perhaps crushing the man underneath. Nathaniel inched his way toward Vixen and the other horse with his arms outstretched. "Whoa now, girl. Easy, Vixen, easy." The reins, more than Nathaniel, saved them. With the leather wrapped around her, the carriage horse finally refused to move, and Vixen, satisfied that the mare was completely under her control, stopped too. Nose to nose, the horses snorted into each other's nostrils, completing the negotiation between them. Carefully, Nathaniel took hold of Vixen's halter. He held the carriage horses as well. Vixen even nudged Nathaniel in a friendly manner, as if to say the chaos she'd caused had been a fine joke between them. With a hearty laugh, a man approached Nathaniel. Head bent, Nathaniel got his usual chest-down view of a person. The man's tall boots were polished but well-worn, and his plain breeches had rub marks along the thighs from the saddle, telling Nathaniel the man spent many hours riding horses. "Quite a horse, lad," he said in a young, friendly voice. "Is this her usual behavior?" Nathaniel hesitated. Not exactly, but close enough. "Aye," he mumbled. "What did you say, lad? Would she be good for the steeplechase in Williamsburg? A rare fast mover, she seems." The man actually laid a gentle hand upon Nathanael's shoulders. Nathanael almost gasped in surprise. For the kindness, Nathanael spoke up honestly. "She doesn't finish well, sir, but she does have beautiful foals." "Yes, the man stroked Vixen's neck. She seemed pleased with the touch. "Know you her price?" "No, sir, but she's caused enough trouble she'd deserve to be bought for shillings." The man laughed. "That will be useful information when I bargain for her." He called to his servant. "Abel, take this horse, please. Let us see what we can have her for." He patted Nathanael on the shoulder and turned to walk away. Oh, why should a devilish maker horse be treated to such a fine owner when a hero like Warrior was left? Nathanael braved to speak. "Sir," he called out. The man stopped. "Yes, lad?" Nathanael was afraid to step forward, afraid to let go the carriage horse, afraid to speak loudly enough for others to hear. The man came back to him with light, athletic strides. He leaned over to be nearer Nathanael's head. "Yes, lad? Have you a secret to tell me?" "There's a fine stallion in the stable, my lord." Nathanael fell back to using Yorkshire's titles for noblemen. "His name is Warrior. He's a grey. You may not recognize him from the track. My master sometimes had us paint him a horse of a different color to get larger odds on him. He oft won disguised as a dark horse. He hasn't run, my lord, for almost a year because they bowed his tendon. But he made a proud riding horse, my lord, and would father fine racers. He and Vix, River Fox," Nathanael nodded toward Vixen, "would have comely foals." "Indeed." "One other thing, my lord. Don't put her under carriage. She doesn't like it," he finished in a whisper. The young man laughed once more. It was a good, deep laugh. No checks, no hesitation about it. The laugh of a free man. "I wager not, lad. Thank you. And you needn't call me my lord. There are no lords here in Virginia, just citizens with all the rights afforded Englishmen that God granted us. Here in Virginia, lad, a man can accomplish anything when guided by reason and self-reliance. So my father and his friends claim, at least." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a coin and placed it into Nathanael's hand. "Godspeed, lad." The young man walked away as others called to him. John Henry, here's the jolly fellow. Come tell us about the latest trouble your father is causing. Think you Virginians will stop drinking tea and merchants will cast aside their fortunes to forego British imports? On the oratory of that obstinate firebrand Patrick Henry? And does he really think that will convince Britain and the king to change their ways? Is he mad? Indeed, friends, he is, but to listen to him is to embrace what he says. He has the preacher's way about him. He certainly convinced me of things when I full planned to disagree with them. I believe if he could have an audience with His Majesty, he could convince King George to pay us taxes. The man walked out of earshot. Nathanael looked into his hand. A shilling! A whole shilling! He furtively bit the coin to test its strength, real all right, before thrusting it into his pocket. As an indentured servant, he had to carry a pass, a legal permission slip, to run errands for the master off the plantation. He didn't know if he were allowed to have coin of his own. Nathanael glanced about to make sure that no one saw him pocket the precious money, afraid they might take it away. It was only then that he realized that the old fellow remained frozen to the carriage seat, still clutching the wooden box to his chest, breathing heavily as if dazed. Threading the reins back through the harness rigging along the horse's rump, Nathanael attached them to the front of the carriage. He stooped to pick up the books, dusting them off. Gulliver's Travels, he sounded out in his mind. Robinson Crusoe. The Whole Duty of Man. The Art of the Thinking. He gathered up a dozen leather-bound volumes and packed them into the carriage. Still more littered the ground. He paused a moment, worried that the old man was ill, since he remained silent and completely still. Nathanael came around to touch his shoe, about to ask if he could help him out of the riding chair. But before Nathanael could speak, he felt himself lifted and twisted around to confront Owen's blood-red face, snarling in anger. You saucy whelp! You'll learn to trick me so! Chapter 5. Owen's first blow caught Nathanael full in the right eye, sending a concussion of pain through his skull. The second split his lip. By the third, Nathanael had managed to hold his hands up to protect his face. Owen switched to pounding Nathaniel's back. It felt as if he were being stoned. "That's enough, man. Hold!" Through hits, Nathaniel heard the alarmed voice of the old man in the carriage chair. "Stop, I say!" "He's my property," shouted Owen. "I'm going to beat the trouble out of him." Another blow, and Nathaniel crumpled to the ground. Owen gave him a kick. "There, brat, now get up and find me another horse." The world was rocking, the feet in front of his eyes spinning around and around. Nathaniel couldn't move. "Get up!" Owen hauled Nathaniel to his feet. Nathaniel hung limp. "I insist! Let the lad go!" came the same reedy voice. The riding chair lurched a bit, and a delicate but determined hands managed to pry Nathaniel loose and prop him up against its huge wheel. Nathaniel noticed the hands were stained heavily with ink before he slowly slid down the wheel to the ground. Now came the clatter of running feet. Shoes seemed to dance around him. Nathaniel blinked to clear his blurred vision. "What's the matter, man?" "He nearly killed the boy." "No need to beat him so, blacksmith. You'll lose your investment." "He's mine to do with as I want," Owen roared. Another set of feet walked up, boots Nathaniel had seen before. They belonged to the auctioneer. "We haven't signed the indentureship papers yet, Mr. Owen. Seems to me the lad might not be what you need after all. Perhaps you'd like to consider one of the stronger slaves." "This one will do, I tell you. He just needs forging, like a piece of iron that must be beaten into shape." "How much is the boy's price?" asked the old man's thin voice. £11, sir, his cost of passage." Mr. Owen offered 8 and 10 for him. There was a momentary silence. "I'll pay 10 for him." "What?" Owen shouted. "I'll not be outbid for a cur like this." "The bidding stands at £10, Mr. Owen. Would you care to top it?" asked the auctioneer. There was another silence. Nathaniel fought to remain conscious. "Fine," Owen spluttered. "Take the devil child. He'll rob you in your sleep for your pains, mark my word." One after another, the feet began to move off. After watching the fat, cracked shoes of Owen stomp away, Nathaniel let the world go black. He awoke in the shade, propped up against a tree. Pulling a wet rag from his eyes, Nathaniel saw the carriage horse tethered beside him, still attached to the riding chair, but calm and eating grass. He heard the same voice that had saved him from Owen. "Tis, tis, tis, such a pity. I suppose I have to give up this book on surveying. I won't really use that, and I don't need the poor planter's position. I have Ainsworth's dictionary already, so I suppose I don't need Samuel Johnson's, although I did so covet it for its wit. Truly I did." Nathaniel watched the old man sitting in the riding chair sorting through his books. He could tell his right eye was badly swollen from the beating, as each blink stung horribly. The fellow continued talking to himself. "That brings the tally to £4 10 shillings. What other book should I give back to make up the rest of the boy's cost?" He sighed plaintively and crossed his arms. "A pity it is, but it can't be helped. After all, Aesop said that no act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted. The lad may become the mouse that saves this poor old lion one day. Yes, perhaps." He eyed the pile of books on the seat next to him. "I will not give up Pope's Essay on Man. I have wanted that too long. I'll just have to forego Ovid's Metamorphoses. That makes £6. 4 more pounds to make up. 3 more books to choose. I'll even get back 10 shillings. There's a happy thing." He was an angular older man, all elbows and knees, it seemed, like a grasshopper. He wore his own gray hair tied back with black ribbon, bow akimbo. His face was lean, with pronounced cheekbones, and his eyebrows were hairy and a bit wild, sticking almost straight up. He needed a shave. Nathaniel tried to puzzle out the man's circumstances. His English frock coat was simple, dark, with wooden buttons. No shine about him. He was no merchant, clearly, or he was one who had fallen on hard times. A tradesman didn't usually wear a coat like that. A middling planter, perhaps? Why so consumed with books, then? He wouldn't have time from his fields to read that many. While Nathaniel was looking him over, the old man glanced his way. Instantly, Nathaniel dropped his gaze. "There, boy, feeling better?" The riding chair squeaked as the man climbed out of it. "Let me see that eye." Nathaniel turned his head away. "You needn't fear me, child." He knelt and reached out to gently lift Nathaniel's chin. Their eyes met. The man's were hazel, a mixture of green with golden brown, surrounded by laugh lines. There was merriment in them. Nathaniel held his breath. The old fellow smiled. "That's better. It looks as if that swelling will not completely close up your eye. It'd be a tragedy to shut off that, unique blue." He let go Nathaniel's chin and extended his hand. "We should introduce ourselves in proper fashion. I am Basil Wilkinson, schoolmaster and music teacher, sometime clerk. And you?" In disbelief, the man had asked his name. He took Basil's hand. "Nathaniel Dunn's servant, sir," he mumbled. "What ship brought you here, Nathaniel?" "The Planter. I came over on the Justitia. Was schoolmaster for the children of this household for 4 years before the sons went off to Harvard and the girls were sent to England to find husbands. It was a happier era for this family then. My time was much easier than I warrant yours has been. Now I make my way as best I can in Williamsburg. When I read in the Virginia Gazette this estate was for sale, I came back to purchase the books I used to teach these children. I'm sentimental, cannot help myself. Besides, I can well use the books to tutor others." He stood. "Can you walk?" "Aye, sir." Nathaniel lifted himself, head throbbing. "Good. We'll leave in a moment. I wish to make it across the York River before dark. I just have to settle accounts first. The auctioneer said I could turn in 7 books to make up your price." Absorbed in the thought, Basil turned. "Oh, yes, a slave brought a sack he said belonged to you. He's the one who carried you to this tree." Nathaniel knew that must have been Moses. Did, Nathaniel choked on the words. Was he not to have the chance then to say farewell? Basil waited. Nathaniel tried again. Did he say where he was to go?" "No, lad. He left with a number of slaves. The man taking them spoke kindly to them. That's all I can tell you." Just like that. Gone. With no knowledge of where Moses had been taken. That's the way of it. Nathaniel took a deep breath and squelched his sorrow. Well, if that were the way of it, 'twas better to feel nothing at all. Nathaniel vowed to lock his heart closed. Basil turned back to sorting. "Perhaps I can keep this book of botany and sell it to Mr. Wythe, a fine man of learning, Nathaniel, who lives next door to the house in which I lodge. Interested in natural sciences as well as the law he teaches. An enlightened man, to be sure. He even has a reverse kind of telescope that allows a man to see tiny things like ants up close and larger." Basil stopped a moment and stared off into space, then shook his head. "Amazing, truly amazing what man can invent. We are in such an age, my friends, such an age of discovery and new thought. Well, if I sell this volume to him, perhaps he'll let me borrow it. That's a plan. We'll keep the botany then, but what to sacrifice? I need Wise's arithmetic and Salmon's geography and grammar. Here, Mercer's abridgment of law. This one can be left behind. Oh, I've forgotten the count. That would bring me to... Nathaniel knew, the way Basil had been tallying before, each book was priced at 30 shillings. 20 shillings made up a pound. That meant Basil had now accounted for 7 pounds 10 shillings of Nathaniel's price. "That leaves you 2½ pounds to make up, master." Nathaniel spoke with shame. He felt horrible that this man was giving up things he clearly wanted to save Nathaniel from Owen. Basil looked at him in surprise. "Can you cipher, lad?" "Aye, sir, a little." "Read?" Nathaniel nodded again. "Poorly, sir, but I can." "That is excellent. Good news, Nathaniel. I had no idea what I was to do with you in Williamsburg. I have no need of a servant. I barely feed myself by teaching grammar and Latin, violin, and flute. But I rent an upstairs room from Mrs. McGuire, and her husband Eden runs a profitable carriage-making shop. He just advertised for apprentices. He wants them, let's see how he put it, gently brought up and tolerably educated. If you can read, well, now normally he would expect a boy's family to pay an apprentice fee. Then Eden would keep the boy 7 years teaching him the trade in exchange for his labor. But Eden has little patience for teaching. I came to know him by teaching one of his apprentices to write." Basil rubbed his face, his beard stubble bristling. "Perhaps we can bargain this way. The spinet is for Mrs. McGuire. She wishes me to teach her to play like ladies of fashion. When she heard that the daughter of silversmith Getty across Palace Green was being taught harpsichord, she was determined to learn herself. Mr. McGuire lent me this writing chair to bring home that spinet. He bade me promise to tell everyone I met that he made it. It's a fine one, don't you think?" Oh dear, I hope I have hawked it enough for him. Eden sees the value of creative arrangements. Yes, yes. Basil reflected a moment. He could be harsh with his help, though. He squinted his eyes as if trying to see a memory. But truth be told, I have never seen him lay more than a slap on his servants. It's more Mrs. McGuire whom he constantly berates. Perhaps in exchange for lessons, that way you'd stay under my care mostly. I think it would be all right. It was hard for Nathaniel to follow Basil's meandering thoughts, but it sounded as if he would stay with Basil and be hired out to work for this carriage maker, a common enough arrangement with servants. Certainly the writing chair was well made. It was a good trade to learn. Still an unknown, but it was far more promising one than going with Owen. When he saw Basil pick up a transverse German flute and hold it, weighing its value, Nathaniel knew what he should do. He opened his sack as Basil prattled on to himself. I have an English flute already. It's just that these transverse flutes seem to handle livelier music better than my recorder can. They have a brighter, fuller tone, but its cost is £3. If I give it up, that would finish Nathaniel's price and give me coin for the ferry crossing as well. Oh, he sighed deeply. Here, master. Nathaniel held up the flute his father had given him. You may have this. He didn't know how to play it. His father had deserted him. The one thing Nathaniel felt truly precious was his mother's Bible. That and the other pair of breeches and shirt she had made him would remain as treasure in his otherwise empty sack. Basil took the long, thin instrument and placed it to his lips to test it. A sweet, melancholy tune came out. Lovely, murmured Basil. Do you play, Nathaniel? No, sir. How did you come by it, then? My father gave it to me. Where is he now? Nathaniel shrugged and looked to his feet. A long pause before Basil played the plaintive melody again. When done, he asked, Know you the words, Nathaniel? Shaking his head, Nathaniel kept looking to the ground. It was one of the first songs I learned in this land. A fellow indentured servant taught me. These are some of the words to it. In a quavery voice he sang, 5 years served I under Master Guy in the land of Virginio, which made me for to know sorrow, grief, and woe, when that I was weary, weary, weary-o. I have played my part both at plough and cart in the land of Virginio. Billets from the wood upon my back they load when I was weary, weary, weary-o. Nathaniel fought off tears. Did this man understand what the last 2 years had been like? The terror and pain of becoming a piece of property, of being left among strangers who cared nothing about him, a beloved parent dead, the other essentially so. He could feel Basil watching him closely, and he could barely stand it. When Basil finally spoke, it was in a solemn, pact-making voice. Let us do this, Nathaniel Dunn. I will borrow this flute from you, and I will teach you to play it as well, so that we may entertain ourselves and the McGuires with music. Will that suit? Nathaniel was being asked. Hope's all things? Nathaniel pushed aside the hope that bubbled up within him. Careful. There's no telling what might happen in Williamsburg, and who's to say this old man will keep his promises? Aye, master, it suits, Nathaniel muttered, keeping his voice clean of emotion. Let us be on our way, then.